And please join me in welcoming our chief guest for this evening, Professor Kip Thorne. He's accompanied by the chairpersons of the juries of the Infosys Prize, the trustees of the Infosys Science Foundation, and with them, of course, the winners of the Infosys Prize 2017. May I also remind you once again to please put your mobile phones or devices in a silent mode for the duration of this evening's program. Thank you. Thank you. I would request the jury chairs and the winners to take their seats. Well, on behalf of all of us here at the Infosys Science Foundation, our very warm wishes to each and every one of you at the start of this new year. Welcome to this evening's program. My name is Deepak Padaki. I head strategy for Infosys, and it is my privilege to be your host tonight. Materials have always defined periods of human ingenuity, from the stones of the Stone Age to those of bronze and gold, and to now, the age of silicon. And we are delighted to have with us this evening Nitish Bharti, India's first international sand artist. And he's going to tell us a story now through his mesmerizing art form. May I call upon Nitish Bharti?
The magic of science is in everything around us. in the gigantic universe that we cannot see fully, and the cosmic mysteries that we try to unravel. It tells us how the globe was once a magma ocean and how it evolved into the planet Earth, our home. Science tells us amazing stories, stranger than fiction. The tale of the two cells that met long, long ago, and the chemistry that brought them together. The ordinary things we see all around us and miss the magic of sometimes. Have you ever peered closely at a broccoli bud? The number of spirals on the head of a Romanesco broccoli is a Fibonacci number.
How about that for a bit of science in your soup?
Have you ever felt a snowflake on your face? Or tasted it on the tip of your tongue? Just some water molecules lined up in a perfect hexagonal array. Why are no two alike? The very essence of science is figuring out what things are made of and how things work. Science looks for little secrets in all things natural. And helps us see nature's grand design. Which forms the foundation for all things man-made. The Infosys Science Foundation celebrates all science. Welcome to the Infosys Prize.
Wow, the mysteries of science brought alive through sand art. Thank you, Nitish, for that curtain raiser. Nitish is the only artist in the world whose sand art movie got a nomination at the Cannes Festival. He was a finalist at India's Got Talent Season 4 and a semi-finalist at Asia's Got Talent. Let's give him another round of applause. And now, as they clear the stage, I'm going to request the president of the Infosys Science Foundation, Mr. K. Dinesh, and Mr. Narayana Murthy, founder of Infosys, to accompany our chief guest, Nobel laureate Professor Kip Thorne, to the stage. And I also request the chairpersons of the juries of the Infosys Prize to take their seats on the dais. Thank you for your patience. Ladies and gentlemen, our chief guest, Professor Kip Thorne, Mr. K. Dinesh, Mr. Narayana Murthy, our jury chairs, Professor Inder Verma, Professor Pradeep Khosla, Professor Srinivas Kulkarni, Professor Srinivasa Vardhan, Professor Kaushik Basu, Professor Akhil Bilgrami. And to kick things off, for his opening address, may I request Mr. K. Dinesh, President of the Infosys Science Foundation, to please come on the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I feel privileged to welcome our chief guest for the evening, Nobel laureate Professor Kip Thorne, esteemed jury chairs, seated on the dais, jury members, recipients of the 2017 Infosys Prize, and their families, trustees of the Infosys Science Foundation, and members of the media, as well as all the invitees. I welcome you all to the presentation ceremony of Infosys Prize 2017. It has been a curious time for science with spectacular revelations. There are times nowadays when I am not sure whether I am living in the real world or in a sci-fi movie universe. In August last year, scientists at the Advanced Laser Interferogravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO as we know it, detected something remarkable. Many of you may know. 1.3 billion light years away, two super dense neutron stars had crashed into each other. The collision of these stars sent a ripple through space and time that was then detected on Earth only now. The gravitational waves and electromagnetic signals from this event added to the remarkable milestones of the past couple of years. So we are doubly privileged to have as our chief guest Professor Kip Thorne, who co-founded the LIGO project and shared the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physics for his path-breaking work. Thanks to the work of countless researchers and scientists like him, our understanding of the universe has grown in leaps and bounds. Even as the Cassini mission to Saturn came to a spectacular end, NASA's Juno mission will start sending us data from Jupiter. The CRISPR gene editing tool has added to the scientists' arsenal in the battle against HIV and cancer. On the lighter side, researchers at MIT have developed Shelley, the robot, which has been attempting somewhat successfully to write horror fiction. That is disruptive innovation, ladies and gentlemen. The winners we are recognizing this evening, 3 women and 3 men, are a true testimony to the symbiotic relationship between science and society. They have pushed the boundaries of their own fields, blurring the line between disciplines. Among them, we have a computer scientist whose work is advancing research in cancer and HIV, a neurobiologist who uses computational methods to understand the machinery of the brain, a chemist building nano devices to investigate DNA and cell functions, a modern mathematician who has made improvements in studying ancient number theory, a scholar of Old English who ironically went on to study post-partition traumas, and a legal scholar who deals with property rights of the intellectual kind. If we look up to these exceptional people who push the frontiers to transform our societies, celebrating such talent in research is pivotal to the Infosys Science Foundation, and it does this through Infosys Prize. In 2009, Narayan Murthy called upon some of us to join him in setting up the Infosys Science Foundation with a vision to restore the romance of science and research and make science fashionable once again. Today, we have several initiatives designed to help build the support structure for scientists and researchers. From spreading the news about their work through Infosys Prize lectures across the country to training educators and engaging students in the wonder of science. Our desire is to create a pipeline of bold and young, curious, who go to think out of the boundaries of traditional ideas. I hope the students get inspired and make contributions that we can have the honor of recognizing at future Infosys Prize ceremonies. On that note, without much ado, let's now begin the celebration of excellence in the sciences and humanities by felicitating the winners of the Infosys Prize 2017. Thank you. Over to you, Deepak.
Thank you, Mr. Dinesh. You know, I was thinking about that fabulous display of sand art we saw, and I wonder, what does it mean to be a human made of carbon in this age of silicon? To be able to explore and express the human spirit through technology. And today, as we celebrate the accomplishments of our Infosys Prize winners, it is this that stands out. Whether in using technology to understand ourselves better, figuring out the complexities of the human brain, or just juxtaposition of modernity with tradition. Our first laureate for this evening in engineering and computer science is researching, or should I say searching, for patterns and knowledge in large data sets, optimizing algorithms for biological data analysis. She's an alumnus of the Calcutta University and is a director at the Indian Statistical Institute. To tell you more about her work and to announce the Infosys Prize for Engineering and Computer Science, let me first introduce you to the jury chair for this category, Professor Pradeep Khosla. Professor Khosla is Chancellor, University of California at San Diego in the USA. He was previously Dean of the College of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering, a fellow of the IEEE, and of the American Association of Artificial Intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Khosla.
Thank you, and good evening. So my job today is to explain to you some really complicated work in algorithms that is being recognized today. So the algorithms that we are talking about are called clustering algorithms. And as I was thinking about this, I realized the best metaphor for clustering algorithms is connecting the dots. So if you think about the metaphor for connecting the dots in adult discourse, it means the ability to look at multiple different ideas and put it all together, see one big idea in it. It means looking at a mass of data and trying to see something interesting in that data. And if you go back in your childhood, or if you have kids, you know that all of these paint by numbers, connecting the dots, these are the way kids learn to identify patterns. But the question is, how does one make a computer do this? And one makes a computer do this by building what are called clustering algorithms or optimization algorithms. And these algorithms have amazing applications, for example, in image analysis. So if you wonder how the Google car is running around autonomously, it is basically building a map and clustering to find out what is a tree and what's a human being and who's moving and who's not moving. If you think about bioinformatic analysis, which is a very recent field, these algorithms have been used to look at genetic data. So this is exactly what Professor Sangamitra Bandyopadhyay has been working on for the last 20 plus years, where she's developed amazing algorithms and heuristics that allow what we call as NP-complete problems to be computed in a reasonably efficient manner. She has not solved the NP-complete problem, so don't get me wrong. These are complicated algorithms where heuristics are used to create better computation. And amazingly, she's applied this to multiple domains, and one of her methods is being used at Sandia National Labs to look at water contamination, which is a very important problem. And more recently, her work was used to identify, using genomic data, markers for breast cancer, just from data, which have been then later identified and validated in laboratory experiments. Really amazing work for a computer scientist to be pushing the state of the art in medicine, in life sciences, in bioinformatics. So for this amazing work, let me read the citation. The jury unanimously awards the Infosys Prize 2017 for Engineering and Computer Science to Professor Sangamitra Bandyopadhyay, the director of Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, for a scholarly record in algorithmic optimization and for its significant impact on biological data analysis. Her discoveries include a genetic marker for breast cancer, determination of co-occurrence of HIV and cancers, and the role of white cells in Alzheimer's disease. Please congratulate Dr. Bandyopadhyay.
Thank you, Professor. We asked Professor Bandyopadhyay to tell us about her mission, and this is what she had to say. Can we roll the video, please?
My parents were always very supportive about education in general. They've also insisted that I should do whatever I wanted to. So that has often given me courage to do a lot of things which maybe otherwise I wouldn't have done. My journey has really started from pattern recognition, developing better clustering methods, coupled with better optimization techniques in order to gain better and better biological insights. What I hope to achieve is my work, my results, becomes a part of such an healthcare initiative which actually is implemented and starts helping people in terms of their disease prevention or disease curing of diseases, therapies. So that is what keeps me going.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on stage Professor Sangamitra Bandyopadhyay. I request Mr. Srinath Bhatni, the anchor trustee for this category, to join us. And may I request our chief guest, Professor Thorne, to present the Infosys Prize in Engineering and Computer Science to Professor Sangamitra Bandyopadhyay. Thank you. Professor Bandyopadhyay would like to say a few words. Thank you, Professor Thorne.
First of all, I'm extremely grateful to Infosys Science Foundation for having instituted this award. This is the 9th year of its existence, and it has gone from strength to strength. There's a lot of respect and stature associated with this award. It's highly competitive, we understand that. And I know many very good scientists don't even want to get nominated because it's so competitive. So thank you very much for having thought about this. Thank you to all the jury members. Thanks, my heartfelt gratitude for having recognized my work with this very important award. No scientist, I think, works for awards, but scientists work for the sake of the science, for sake of new discoveries, new inventions. But when these awards come, these recognitions come, it feels good. It also gives us energy to do better. Of course, I have to thank my family for having put up with me, with my hectic schedule, with my peculiarities, often with a smile, sometimes without a smile, but having put up with me after all. My teachers, all my teachers, I have moved different schools, in different schools all over the country. All my teachers for having believed in me, for having goaded me to reach out for the sky. And finally, I have to thank my students, because it is actually one of my students who got me interested in biology. I was scared to death of biology in my school days. But later on in my research life, I got interested in biology because of one of my students who had a biology background and told me that computer science, mathematical modeling, statistical modeling had a lot to contribute in biology. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Congratulations, Professor. I'm sure, like your algorithms, the jury quickly converged to reward you for your exciting work. The Infosys Prize consists of a gold medal, a citation, and a purse of rupees 65 lakh in each category. The winners are selected by juries consisting of leading researchers from around the world, represented here on the stage by our jury chairs. Our next laureate, and this is in the category of Humanities, is also an alumnus of University of Calcutta, but also of Oxford and Cambridge. She's currently a professor of English literature at King's College in London. In the interstices of modernity, she is discovering that elements of tradition still exist. And to announce the award, I would like to introduce Professor Akhil Bilgrami, a member of the jury for this category. Professor Bilgrami has most graciously accepted to step in for the jury chair, Professor Amartya Sen, who unfortunately could not travel to be with us for tonight's event. Professor Akhil Bilgrami is the Sidney Morgan Besser Professor of Philosophy at Columbia University in the USA. He received a first degree in English literature from Elphinstone College, Mumbai, and then went on as a Rhodes Scholar to Oxford. He's the author of many books and teaches courses and seminars regularly in the philosophy of mind and language. He's also speaking on issues of politics and religion. He's a recipient of fellowships and grants from the Mellon Foundation, the Ford Foundation, as well as the Lush Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Akhil Bilgrami.
Let me say just a few words about this remarkable scholar, Ananya Kabir's work, before I read out the citation. She's a leading voice in comparative literature with a canvas that extends from Kashmir to Africa. Her work really illuminates a very fundamental theme that has vexed a number of disciplines, and this is the theme which we are all familiar with, and that is the relationship between tradition and modernity. Even as she acknowledges the increasing sway of modernity ever since colonialism, what is really remarkably insightful in her literary scholarship, and it's much more than literary, it's ethnographic, it's historical, is that she locates pockets within modernity, pockets of enchantment in nature, in community life of the village, and its aesthetic expression. And what we jurors felt was that the lesson we learned from this work is that though we, of course, think quite rightly that there is much to criticize in tradition from the point of view of modernity, her work allows us the thought that there might be in tradition some conceptual and aesthetic resources by which we can put constraints which are humane and wise on modernity. So for all these insightful achievements, the Infosys Foundation has awarded her this prize for her highly original explorations of the long-standing historical elements, conceptual, social, and cultural, in colonial modernity, and for a subtle and insightful ethnography of culture and political life in Kashmir.
Thank you, Professor. We asked Professor Kabir to talk about her work, and we have a short video for that. And may I request you?
I was growing up as a Bengali Muslim child in the Deccan. There was a dissonance in the life of my home and the life outside, but it was a very creative dissonance because it made me understand what living in a composite society was all about. I always want to be the kind of person who works through a spirit of dissonance. I want to continue to take subjects that most people think don't belong to me. And I want to continue to ask very simple questions from those subjects which are apparent to me because I don't belong to those subjects. And I want to continue to write interesting books which hopefully make people think twice about themselves and their place in the world.
Please join me in welcoming on stage Professor Ananya Jahanara Kabir. I request Mr. Narayana Murthy, Anchor Trustee for this category, to join the presentation, and I request Professor Thorne to present the Infosys Prize in Humanities, Professor Ananya Jahanara Kabir. Professor Bilgrami, would you join us here as well? Thank you. Professor would like to say a few words. Thank you, Professor Thorne, Professor Bilrami, and Mr. Murthy.
Professor Thorne, Mr. Narayan Murthy, esteemed jury members and chairs and trustees, my fellow laureates, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for the honor of this prize, which I'm delighted to accept on behalf and as a representative of my discipline, an ancient yet ever-relevant discipline of the humanities. I want to quote a poet, Czesław Miłosz, writing in 1945 from a Europe deep in war. What is poetry which doesn't speak to nations or people? It is but a collusion with official lies. For us, it is the poet who reveals to us the hopes and aspirations of a people, but it's also the task of the humanities scholar to convince the world of the need of the poet, and to do so with a voice that combines a critical demeanor as well as compassion. And in so-called post-truth age of today, we really need ever more the means to decode how rhetoric and how words and images are mobilized for the better or for the worse. But we cannot lose sight of the wonder, of the excitement of the work of art, as we saw in the sand art today. And that is a wonder that actually manifests the spirit of humanity and of resilience in the face of brutality. And this, is a lesson that actually I first learned from the people of Kashmir. So I do thank them, since my work on Kashmir has been cited. And I also, of course, want to thank all those people who love me, who support me, who inspire me, and who put up with me, hold me accountable. And these must include my students and all those I mentor. Of course, my teachers and my mentors. I'm so disappointed that Professor Sen couldn't be here with us today, because surely he's an inspiration for all of us working in the humanities. And of course, last but not at all least, my family, who are really so supportive of me and always make me laugh and realize how to continue through the hard work of research, and who've shown me how to occupy the world really on my own terms. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Professor. Congratulations. I'm reminded of a quote by J. Krishnamurti. Tradition becomes our security, but when the mind is secure, it is in decay. So thank you for continuing to keep the light linking the past with the future. Our next laureate is from right here in Bangalore, the National Center of Biological Sciences. He obtained his doctoral degree from IIT Kanpur and is intrigued by the brain's computational machinery. To announce the Infosys Prize in Life Sciences, I am pleased to introduce the jury chair for this category, Dr. Inder Verma. Dr. Verma is professor at the Laboratory of Genetics, American Cancer Society Professor of Molecular Biology, and the Irwin and Jones Chair in Exemplary Life Science at the Salk Institute of Biological Studies in the USA. He is a recipient of the Specter Prize, awarded by Columbia University, and the 22nd Annual Cancer Research Award of the Passarao Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, the distinguished Dr. Inder Verma.
The Infosys Prize for 2017 for Life Sciences is awarded to Professor Upinder Singh Bhalla, Professor NCBS and Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Bangalore, for his pioneering contributions to the understanding of the brain's computational machinery. His investigations have revealed essential neuronal computations that underlie the ability to acquire, integrate, and store complex sensory information and to utilize that information for decision and action. Quite a mouthful. If you don't understand it, neither did I. So let me tell you, why was the jury excited about seeing Upi, he's known as Upi as Upinder Bhalla. Why were we excited about it? So imagine yourself going to a museum, let's say Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, and you see Rembrandt's Night Watch. There are about 30 characters in it, and many more innate and inanimate characters in it. The light from the picture has to come through your retina, go through your receptor cells, register on your brain has to recollect that memory, and all of that happens in the blink of an eye. Think about it. How does the brain compute all that information in such a short period of time to be able to tell you, that's just one picture, but there are hundreds of other such things you can recall. Imagine yourself again in a room where somebody has a coffee, or a tea, or a ripening French cheese, or a rotten fruit, or even an old fish. And yet, you can very quickly smell the odors. You can distinguish between these odors. And all that has to be, again, someplace in your brain, someplace in your memory, someplace in those your neurons in the brain, which are trillions of them, this information is stored. How is the information stored? And it's just not an idea, just he had first in terms of its theory, but in fact she went on to do practical experiments. He took advantage of, for example, rodents like rats, who have a very good ability to smell. Of course, they have stereo ability because they're closer to the ground, but it's absolutely essential for the survival of a rat, for example, or survival of many animals, because smell becomes an important part of survival. So how are these things, what we call sensory perceptions, touch, smell, vision, auditory, how are all these information stored? We normally don't think about it. We just do that over regular life. But in fact, they are fundamentally essential for our survival. Your moods, your behavior, all of them are influenced very much by your perception. So what UPI has been able to do, along with many of his students over the last 20, 25 years, is to be able to take this experimental view of how these important perceptions of our life can then be computed in our brain, and how we can use that information to try to understand some of these fundamental problems. This is really, you should think about, is an exceptionally basic problem of life. And to be able to do that in a manner where you actually first do the theory, then you do the experiment, then you come back and try to combine together is really quite phenomenal and exceptional. Therefore, you can well imagine why we were so excited by UPI's work. So UPI, heartiest congratulations to you and to all your students, and we were delighted to have the ability to choose you as the 2017 winner. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. And here is Professor Balla reflecting on his interests.
As long as I remember, I was very into the hard sciences and maths and physics and so on, computing. And biology was not exciting the way it was taught in school. In college, I got to see biology taught really as it should be taught. I'm interested in studying everything from the logic of DNA to the developmental decisions that make you a human being as opposed to a starfish. All of these things are computations. The dream that I have and many scientists have is to understand how the brain works. It's just going to be a wonderful journey to see what are the fundamental things that underlie these processes of intelligence and so on that we've been seeking all these centuries.
Please welcome on stage Professor Upinder Balla. I request Mr. Nandan Nilekani to join us in the presentation. I request Professor Thorne to present the Infosys Prize in Life Sciences to Professor Upinder S. Balla. Thank you, sirs. Professor, a few words from you.
I'd like to thank the members of the jury and the Infosys Prize Foundation for this huge honor and especially for the recognition which this gives to basic applied research in all fields. I think that this recognition is extremely important for all of society, that people appreciate the value that sciences contribute. Since I'm here, I would like to say that as an awardee, I am enormously honored and privileged, but this is just the very, very tip of an iceberg of many, many people, the unsung heroes who have excelled in many of their own ways in their work as administrators, as people handling the finances, as people running the backbone of institutions, of people who have trained generations of students to serve society through industry, through teaching, through all of these areas. They're all exemplars in their own way. They've all achieved excellence. And as I stand here, you know, the obvious people to credit are my colleagues and my students. But I think far beyond that, it's all of the people who do fantastic work in their everyday life, who make up the very fabric of excellence in all fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. You know, they say about good research that it starts by finding the right problem, and Professor, you surely smelt a good one for your study. Andrew Wiles, the professor who finally solved Fermat's last theorem, said that you should always try the problem that matters most to you. And for him, the definition of a good math problem is the math that it generates rather than the problem itself. And the winner of this year's Infosys Prize in Mathematics is a professor at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai and also at the Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata. He set out on a quest to solve that other riddle of our times, the Riemann hypothesis. To tell you more, let me introduce you to Professor Srinivasa Vardhan, the jury chair for mathematical sciences. Professor Vardhan is a professor of mathematics and the Frank J. Gould Professor of Science at the Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences in New York University. In 2011, he was awarded the highest honor bestowed by the United States government on scientists, engineers, and inventors, the National Medal of Science, for his work in probability theory. He's a winner of the Abel Prize in 2007 and was awarded the Padma Bhushan in 2008. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Srinivasa Vardhan.
Thank you. I have about 4 minutes to explain what the theory is. Let me try. Of course, I need to keep 1 minute for the citation at the end, so I really have 3 minutes. So let me get started. Every child at some point in the age 2 or 3 starts counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so counting is easy. The next step is addition. At the age of 5 or 6, a child can add. At the age of 7 or 8, maybe the child can even multiply. At that point, you realize, or you can tell the child, all numbers are not the same. Some numbers like 4, 6, 9, 12 can be split as the product of two numbers, whereas there are numbers like 3, 5, 7 that cannot be split, and these are the prime numbers. Okay. So the first question one can ask is, suppose I keep on writing the prime numbers, will it end at some point? Will I keep continuing to find prime numbers? Are there an infinite number of prime numbers? That question was answered by Euclid 2,000 years ago in the affirmative. But that only tells you there are an infinite number. But, even numbers, 2, 4, 6, are also infinite, but they are roughly half the numbers. So is the prime numbers a fraction of the numbers, or are they much smaller? In order to answer those questions, a lot later, about 300 years, 400 years back, Euler found a method, and he could tell that the number of primes is not as many as even integers, but not as few as squares. The squares, for example, like 4, 9, 16, 25, they're also infinite, but there are large gaps. So they're relatively smaller number than primes. So to study all these things, Euler devised a function which was later modified by Riemann and is now called the Riemann zeta function. And studying that function allows you in some way to infer properties of how the numbers, prime numbers, are distributed. But prime numbers is just one collection of numbers that one is trying to count. There are other things too. For example, Dirichlet decided that he wants to look at how many primes there are in arithmetic progression. Arithmetic progression means you start with, say, number 3 and keep adding 5 to it. 3 plus 5 is 8, 8 plus 5 is 13, 13 plus 5 is 18. This way you generate a sequence of numbers. Can you find primes in that sequence? Instead of all numbers, if you just look at this subsequence of numbers, do you find again an infinite number of primes? In order to study that, he introduced a class of functions called L functions. You might think that Dirichlet is a modest man. He could have called it D functions. Why did he call it L functions? It turns out L is the first initial of his middle name. So those L functions then can be used to study properties of certain, how frequent certain numbers occur. And this type of idea of using certain functions, using properties of those functions, estimates on how those functions grow, can be used to determine the a way of counting certain objects. And this estimation, sometimes there are easy estimates, sometimes one has to work very hard to find better estimates. And getting better estimates gives you better idea of how the number sequence occurs. So for counting of all kinds, this estimates on L functions is extremely important. And what our winner has done, Rithabrata has done, is that he has devised new ways of getting better estimates, which gives you better information about objects like primes. And that's his contribution. So let me read the citation now. The Infosys Prize 2017 for Mathematical Sciences is awarded to Professor Rithabrata Munshi, Professor, School of Mathematics, TIFR Mumbai, and Statistics and Mathematics Unit, Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, for his outstanding contributions to analytic aspects of number theory. Besides ingenious contributions to Diophantine problem, he has established important estimates known as subconvexity bounds for a large class of L functions with methods that are powerful and original. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vardhan, for breaking that down for us. And here is Professor Munshi reflecting on his passion for mathematics. Can we have the video, please?
My romance with mathematics started very early in my life. And I was like 7 or 8 years old. I stumbled upon this journal that my father used to keep, and it had this mathematical expressions which kind of attracted me. There was a mystery behind that I was not able to understand. Then I got this book on Ramanujan. While reading that book, I got attracted to number theory. I think that was the beginning of the journey. So it has been a long journey. It's very hard to imagine a life without math. One day, the way that Ramanujan had influenced me, maybe one day I will be able to influence other kids to take up math and do research in mathematics. That would be fantastic.
Please join me in welcoming on stage Professor Ritabrata Munshi. I request Mr. K. Dinesh, Anchor Trustee for this category, join us in the presentation. I request Professor Thorne to present the Infosys Prize in Mathematics to Professor Munshi. Thank you, Professor. A few words. Thank you, Professor Thorne, Professor Vardhan, and Mr. Dinesh.
Good evening. So it's a great honor to receive this prize. Thanks to Professor Vardhan and other esteemed jury members for considering my work worthy of this award. I would like to thank Infosys Science Foundation for their generosity and for their endeavors to promote curiosity-driven scientific research in this country. Over the years, I have learned from several teachers and many of my collaborators. I'll take this opportunity to express my gratitude to all of them, especially my thesis advisor, Professor Sir Andrew Wiles, for his kindness and inspiration, and my postdoctoral mentor, Professor Hendrik Ivanich, for generously sharing his ideas with me, Professor Ravi Rao for his encouragements and friendship. I would like to thank my family, my mother, my brother, my mother-in-law. Of course, I owe this award to my wife, Shomonitra, whose love and support give me strength, and my little angel, Srotatesha, for her cheerful presence and distractions, which carry me through during frustrating failures. And I miss my father, who would have been so proud today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Munshi. With friends like complex numbers, non-trivial zeros, L functions, you do live in an unreal world. But then, ladies and gentlemen, who can dispute? If you want to be number one, you have to be odd. Let's move on. This year's winner in the physical sciences category is blurring the lines between cell biology and computing, injecting designer DNA as nanomachines to probe the inner workings of our cells. She's a professor at the University of Chicago and an alumnus from the University of Madras and the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. To announce the prize, it is my pleasure to introduce the jury chair, Professor Srinivas Kulkarni. Professor Kulkarni is George Ellery Hale Professor of Astronomy and Planetary Science at the California Institute of Technology, and he's the director of the famous Caltech optical observatories. His primary interests are the study of cosmic explosions, neutron stars, and in developing new methodologies for astronomical research. He is known for the discovery of the first millisecond pulsar and the first brown dwarf. He's a recipient of many awards, a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, of the Royal Society of London, of the National Academy of Sciences, and of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Science. In 2017, he won the Dan David Prize for his contribution to the emerging field of time domain astronomy. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Srinivas Kulkarni.
The ambit of physical science panel is quite large: geology, paleontology, atmospheric sciences, space sciences, physics, astronomy, and finally chemistry. Fortunately, the difficult task of judging across this wide range of subjects is made easy by having a jury panel which spans many fields. The members were Professor Rajaram Nityananda, Azim Premji University, Founding Director, Spenta Wadia International Center for Theoretical Sciences, Professor Dame Carol Robinson, University of Oxford, Director Emeritus Jiten Goswami, Physical Research Laboratory, and Professor A.R. Ravishankara, Colorado State University. So let me read the citation first. The 2017 Infosys Prize in Physical Sciences is awarded to Professor Yamuna Krishnan for her groundbreaking work in the emerging field of architecture of the building blocks of life, the DNA. By successfully manipulating DNA to create biocompatible nanomachines, she has created novel ways of integrating living systems, increasing our knowledge of cell function, and getting one step closer to answering unresolved biomedical questions. Let me explain this, because it took me, an astronomer, a long time to understand this sort of chemistry. I never learned biology as a student. It showed up. DNA, short for deoxyribonucleic acid, is self-replicating material that is present in nearly all living organisms and is the main constituent of chromosomes. Scientists can make synthetic DNA, that is DNA not found in nature, and these synthetic DNA can be put together very cleverly into tiny, that is nanometer size assemblies that are like little machines. The main advantage of this DNA, synthetic DNA, they have novel functional capabilities that ordinary or natural DNA doesn't have. Until Professor Krishnan's pioneering work, it wasn't clear that one of these synthetic assemblies could wander inside a cell without either interfering with the guts of the cell or being interfered by the innards of the cell. Now, thanks to Professor Krishnan's work, we know the method works. What can these tiny machines do? First, they can be used to take a close-up view of inside a functioning cell. I find that extremely fascinating. In fact, it reminds me of a book I used to read as a teenager, George Gamo's book, Tompkins in Wonderland. So maybe we should have a new book, Tompkins in the Cell Wonderland. Professor Krishnan and a group have been able to measure concentrations of specific chemicals within the cell. For example, she has been able to measure the acidity, that is the concentration of protons, and chloride ions, a component of salt, in different parts of the cell. Second, she has shown that these machines can be used to take specific material to specific sites within the cell. This is what she calls as delivering a cargo. Professor Krishnan is pushing the boundaries of biochemistry and microbiology and things that start working into natural cells. Her work is not only of fundamental scientific interest, but as you can well imagine, could form the basis of new medicine. So I'd like to end by noting that Dr. Krishnan obtained her PhD at ISC, and after a postdoctoral stint at Cambridge University, UK, joined the National Center for Biological Sciences right here in Bangalore. It is at NCBS where she did her pioneering work and that we're recognizing today. It is also this work which led University of Chicago to offer a full professorship a couple years ago. We think she's a true Indian success story. Congratulations, Dr. Krishnan.
Thank you, sir. And here is a video of Professor Krishnan's work.
Me and my sister were always interested in sci-fi. So I remember at the age of 10 and 12, we were watching Star Trek. She said, you know, I think one day there will be looking phones. This sort of vivid imagination was really important, and I think that put us on a path of science. My work involves making small structures using DNA like a filament to give you small devices that carry out specific functions. I really see a future where people with a large number of different diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, would be able to manage and control their own diseases on the back of this technology. I feel every day is exciting because we never know what we're going to learn.
Please join me in welcoming on stage Professor Yamuna Krishnan, and I request Mr. Gopalakrishnan, the anchor trustee for this category, to join us. I request Professor Thorne to present the Infosys Prize in Physical Sciences to Professor Yamuna Krishnan. Thank you. Professor, a few words.
Good evening, everyone. I want to first start by thanking Infosys for celebrating and cherishing science through the Infosys Science Foundation. I then want to remember the late Professor Obaid Siddiqui and Professor K. Vijayaraghavan, who conceptualized and envisioned an institute focused on biology and created this institute, which I think the best way to describe it is it's an institute that dares to dream. I then want to thank Professor K. Vijayaraghavan for giving me my first break, giving me my first job in this very special institute. I thank him for believing in me that as a chemist that I could make an impact in biology. The thing about NCBS is that it's an environment that brings out the extraordinary in ordinary people. And the reason it does so is that we have colleagues who are absolutely incredible, who I have been lucky to know. I want to credit two of these colleagues who have been my collaborators and supporters right from the beginning, probably even mentors. Professor Satyajit Mayer and Professor G.V. Shivshankar. At the time that we wanted to use DNA to make measures of chemistry in cells, people thought we were crazy. But these two people gave me everything, access to their labs, gave of themselves, and helped us to see and make our first breakthrough. I then want to thank every member of my research group for believing in this vision. At the time, we were going against the grain of conventional thinking. And if the technology is what it is today, it is completely because of their efforts. All I've done is be a cheerleader or a psychiatrist, I guess, but it's really all due to them. Finally, I want to thank each and every one of you. Many of you are not scientists, yet you all have come from near and far, made a long journey, and spent a good part of an evening to celebrate science with us. And for this, I thank all of you.
Thank you, Professor. Using synthetic DNA to see, measure, and report things from inside the cell. Wow. I guess it's only a matter of time before social media gets in there. And then we'll be faced with this dilemma of not knowing what is yours and what is yours to share. And this year's winner of the Infosys Prize for Social Sciences, he's an expert on just that. Exclusion versus privacy, and the nature of freedom in the context of social development. He's from Ambedkar University in Delhi and an alumnus of the National Law School, India. To announce the award for social sciences, it is my great pleasure to introduce the jury chair, Professor Kaushik Basu, Professor of Economics and the C. Marks Professor of International Studies at Cornell University. He's the former chief economist of the World Bank and was the chief economic advisor to the government of India. He was awarded the Padma Bhushan in 2008, and in 2017, he became president of the International Economic Association. Professor Kaushik Basu.
The Infosys Prize 2017 for Social Sciences is being awarded to Professor Lawrence Liang, Professor of Law at Ambedkar University, New Delhi, in recognition of his creative scholarship on law and society. His prodigious output in the fields of copyright law, digital technologies, and media consistently raises probing questions about the nature of freedom, rights, and development. His provocative answers link historical context and ethical practice in unexpected and illuminating ways. I'm giving you a blend of the formal jury statement with some of my own observations. As a legal scholar and activist, Professor Liang has made outstanding contributions to the study of free speech, intellectual property, and access to digitalized knowledge in India from a comparative and global perspective. As a co-founder of the Alternative Law Forum, he has shown a remarkable commitment to widening access to legal resources for marginalized communities in India. There's actually a lot of writing even in the United States about legal rights, but if you don't have access to them, it's like being deprived of your basic rights. So the access is indeed a very important topic. His contributions demonstrate how the issues of intellectual property and piracy play out in the realm of law and media in India. Lawrence Liang displays a deep and subtle grasp of the history of copyright issues in the West and demonstrates the dynamic through which the domain of copyright protection, licensing, and commodification has expanded in the era of liberal capitalism. He has made two major theoretical contributions through studying the life experiences of Indians around issues of property, creativity, authorship, and access. He has helped us rethink how the law and ethical practice can address the challenges of exclusion in the emerging digital worlds of India. Lawrence Liang is India's leading scholar of free speech jurisprudence. He has expanded the boundaries of law by using cultural studies to interpret and understand the legal infrastructure of culture. Liang's combination of deep legal scholarship, interdisciplinary originality, and commitment to social inclusion are exemplary and represent the highest values enshrined in the Infosys Prize, Social Sciences Prize. Lawrence Liang grew up in Kolkata, studied at the National School of Law of India and Warwick University. He has been a visiting scholar at Yale and Michigan. He has been a key figure in incorporating open source ideas into the cultural domain. This is the alternate year in which the Social Science Prize is reserved for any field outside of economics. As such, we needed a multidisciplinary jury, and we had a distinguished one that consisted of Arjun Appadurai of NYU, Amita Bhaviskar, Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi, Avinash Dixit of Princeton University, Pratap Bhanu Mehta of Ashoka University, and I chaired the group. Our work began last summer and ended with 2 days of intense deliberation in New York last October. The jury reached the unanimous decision that the person who stood out for his originality and scholarship was Lawrence Liang. Apart from the academic works, he has also, over the years, written essays that are delightful social commentaries, such as his experience when he went to observe a gathering of fans of the actor Rajinikanth. To his dismay, a murmur went through the crowds that assumed Lawrence must be a Japanese who had come all the way to celebrate the stardom of Rajinikanth. And before he knew it, he was led to the dais to be asked questions about the status of Rajinikanth in Japan. I will not give you the last line of the story. It's available on the web. These light anthropological essays are a powerful commentary on society and its mores. But above all, it is the staggering scholarship that Professor Liang brings to bear on the laws and cultural and societal norms that govern rights and claims in the domain of intellectual property in today's fast-developing digital age that will be deemed a lasting contribution. Congratulations, Lawrence Liang.
Thank you, Professor Basu. And here is Professor Liang in a video while presenting his arguments.
I think I was a very argumentative kid. And I remember, a lot of people telling me as a kid, my God, you should become a lawyer. The only reason that one does what one does is to follow some kind of an intellectual itch, a restlessness that drives you. I think that interdisciplinary experimentation requires much greater leaps. Why, for example, do we not see too much conversation between law and art in India? Why do we rely constantly on the great canons, important as they are, but why do we only rely on them? In a way, my personal ambition is to try to be wilder in one's imagination of what one can do for the discipline and for the interdisciplinary conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winner, Professor Lawrence Liang. I request Mr. Mohandas Pai to join us on the stage. And I request Professor Thorne to present the Infosys Prize in Social Sciences to Professor Lawrence Liang. Professor Basu, may I request you to join us? Thank you, sirs. Professor, a few words.
Thank you so much. I'd like to begin by thanking the Infosys Science Foundation and the jury for the social sciences, and particularly Professor Basu, for honoring me. I also stand here extremely humbled by the fact that there are innumerable scholars who you believe should have been here in your place. So I recognize that while awards and prizes are given to individuals, the intellectual journey that they recognize is rarely a solitary one. And in that light, following a German philosopher who said, to think is to thank, I'd like to acknowledge and to thank a large number of people who have made this journey possible. To begin with, my family. I come from a family where I'm the first generation to go to school and to go to college. And maybe once in a while, I miss the opportunity to exchange and to discuss with my mother a lot of my ideas and my work. We don't seem to have a common vocabulary or a language in which one can discuss this. But I realize that it's actually unnecessary. All the conceptual vocabulary that I use to deploy in my understanding of intellectual property, whether hospitality, openness, or generosity, are actually values that I've learned from her as a living ethos. And in that sense, the gap between one's life and one's theoretical or intellectual interests constantly need to be bridged in such a way that we bring these little worlds that we inhabit into the abstract ideas that we actually, kind of practice. And in a similar way, and therefore, my family, my wife have always led me to understanding the abstract much more interestingly. This is also a time for me to acknowledge a large number of researchers, academics who have been on a journey with me, starting with my colleagues at the Alternative Law Forum for 15 years, as well as a number of institutions, including Sarai in Delhi or Ambedkar University, Delhi, where I am based right now. In the last 15 years, the domain of law has opened out to other disciplines, anthropology, economics, history, with a common understanding that law and justice are too important to be left to lawyers alone, and certainly to be reduced to a technical understanding. And I think it's a commitment to an idea of research that recognizes the need for creative ways to explore how we can question power, how we can struggle for justice and dignity together, that in the last 10 to 15 years, this domain has really opened out. And if I accept this award today, it's only with the recognition of a larger community of intellectuals that one is only a part of. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Liang. You know, these days, anything that happens stays on Google forever. And sometimes it makes us want to rewind time. But whether you can go back in time is held in the grip of the law of quantum gravity. Well, so said our next speaker, but before we introduce him, let us watch this short video.
Patience is a virtue that scientists are advised to embrace. The greatest breakthroughs take time. Albert Einstein had to wait nearly a century to be proven right. In 1915, the great physicist predicted that collisions in space could warp the fabric of space-time itself, like a bowling ball warps the surface of a trampoline, sending out ripples called gravitational waves. A century later, an astrophysicist began to unravel the magic of the universe. Time travel, black holes, gravitational radiation, relativity, and wormholes. For this path-breaking discovery, Kip Thorne, along with his two colleagues, Rainer Weiss and Barry Barish, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2017. And then, he took a path less traveled for a scientist. He turned to films. Interstellar, one of his first, was a landmark film, arguably the most scientifically accurate sci-fi movie ever made. Thorne, as technical advisor, ensured that the blockbuster maintained its scientific integrity. He worked with composer Hans Zimmer and visual effects gurus to bring alive visually what he calls the warped side of the universe. This event is an artistic expression of new science that Thorne believes will be a major part of studying the universe in the future. One of this century's most brilliant and multifaceted scientists is now bringing out a book of his poetry and paintings. This polymath is using science and art to explore the unknown and capture the beauty of the world around us. He embodies the best of the human spirit of exploration and creativity. The Infosys Science Foundation is honored to have with us today Professor Kip Thorne, scientist, teacher, artist, and poet.
May I now call Mr. N.R. Narayanamurthy to the podium to formally introduce our chief guest for this evening.
Thank you. Well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our chief guest for the Infosys Prize ceremony this year. That is Professor Kip S. Thorne. Professor Thorne is currently the Feynman Professor of Theoretical Physics, Emeritus, at the California Institute of Technology, where from 1967 to 2010, he led a research group working in relativistic astrophysics and gravitational physics, with emphasis on relativistic stars, black holes, and especially gravitational waves. Professor Thorne, along with Rainer Weiss of MIT and Ronald Drever, was the co-founder of the LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory project that made the breakthrough discovery of gravitational waves arriving at Earth from cosmic sources. It is interesting to note that the discovery was made 100 years after Albert Einstein posited the existence of gravitational waves. Just a few months ago, scientists from the LIGO-Virgo collaboration made a second landmark discovery: the coalescence of two neutron stars, which resulted in a newly born black hole. It is worth noting that it is in such events that elements like gold and platinum are synthesized. Professor Thorne was also the co-founder of the SXS project, that is the Simulations of Extreme Spacetimes project, which provided numerical simulations of the waveforms of colliding black holes. This work underpins the delicate data analysis for the detection of gravitational waves. For his contributions to LIGO and to gravitational wave research, Professor Thorne has shared the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2017. He has also won the Breakthrough Prize for Fundamental Physics Work, the Cowley Prize in Astrophysics, the Shaw Prize in Astronomy, the Graber Cosmology Prize, the Princess of Asturias Award, and the Fudong Zongxi Science Award. Professor Thorne is a prolific and influential educator. 53 students received their PhDs under his supervision. In addition, he has mentored 60 postdoctoral students. Early in his career, Professor Thorne, along with his graduate advisor, the well-known John Archibald Wheeler and Charles Misner, co-authored a book titled Gravitation, which is widely considered to be one of the greatest scientific books of all time. The book has inspired 2 generations of students in general relativity. His recent book with Roger Blandford, titled Modern Classical Physics, is rapidly becoming the standard text for astrophysics graduate students world over. In 2010, Professor Thorne stepped down from his Caltech professorship to pursue a new career at the interface between art and science. This has included the blockbuster movie Interstellar, which arose from a treatment that he co-authored. The movie was directed by Christopher Nolan, with Kip Thorne serving as the executive producer. It is rare to find a scientist who spans such a wide range of activities and skills: research, teaching, inspirational leadership, popular writing, and finally making highly successful movies. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome the nonpareil Professor Kip Thorne.
Mr. Murthy, you embarrass me. I don't know who this guy is. But Mr. Murthy, Mr. Dinesh, trustees of the Infosys Science Foundation, jury chairs, and Infosys Prize laureates. It's to the laureates that I offer my enthusiastic congratulations. Your prize honors your amazing achievements, and you should be very proud. Your prize is also an inspiration for young scientists and for the general public. It calls attention not only to your own work, but also to the beauty of science and the power of science for making life better, better culturally and better materially. Having myself only very recently received my own prize, the one from Stockholm, I've been thinking a lot about the responsibilities that accompany such a prize. You and I have suddenly become icons in the minds of some of the general public, icons for great science. And as icons, we can influence, to some extent, public views of science. And we have the responsibility to use this influence wisely. The world today is beset with problems that have deep technological components, problems such as climate change and the control of nuclear weapons. Solutions to these problems require science, science wielded wisely. Unfortunately, the world has some leaders, especially in America, who are not only ignorant of science, but also dismissive of firm scientific facts. And we scientists have an obligation to educate the public and our leaders about the relevant scientific facts and the power of science to help resolve our problems. And this obligation is particularly strong for icons, as you and I have become. On a more positive note, we also have an opportunity to educate about the wonderful things that science can bring to humanity. Science-based technological advances that improve the standard of living for everybody, and science-based understanding of the universe that can satisfy the natural human curiosity with which we are all born. Now, I'll speak for a short while about technological advances, and then I'll focus on my own personal love, the advances in understanding the universe. There's great emphasis today on transforming scientific discoveries into technological applications, into products that have material and economic benefit for humanity. And this, of course, is good. But all too often, the funding for research is predicated on quick technology transfer, on projects that may lead to practical applications on timescales of just a few years. This worries me because some of the most powerful technological applications require decades, not years. Albert Einstein provides us with a remarkable example. In 1917, as part of his early work on quantum theory, Einstein discovered the concept of stimulated emission of radiation. Suppose you have many atoms all in the same excited state, and then a few photons with just the right energy can come along and trigger these atoms to emit an avalanche of similar photons. Physicists struggled on and off for 36 years to develop a practical application of this idea. And this 36-year struggle ultimately led to a microwave frequency laser, followed a few years later by an optical frequency laser. At first, there were no obvious useful applications of the laser, but after several more decades of hard work, applications did come. And by now, laser-based technology has seeped deep into everyday life, from supermarket scanners to laser-based eye surgery. If practical payoffs were required on timescales of years and not decades, lasers and their applications might not exist today. But to me, the cultural payoffs of science are at least as important as the material payoffs. When Europeans ask what are the greatest gifts that their ancestors in the era of the Renaissance left for us today as our legacy, the answer is generally great art, great music, great architecture, and the scientific method. And when our descendants, 400 years from now, ask, what did we of this era give to them as our legacy to them? I believe that a big part of the answer will be an understanding of the universe and of the laws that govern the universe. And these, I do believe, are the greatest cultural achievements of our era. Remarkably, though, the cultural quest to understand the universe and its laws is actually producing major technological spin-offs. I'll illustrate this with gravitational waves, the central focus of my own career, in a few minutes. Now, the laws of physics tell us that there actually are just two types of waves that can travel across the universe, bringing us information about what's happening very far away and very long ago: electromagnetic waves and gravitational waves. Galileo created electromagnetic astronomy 400 years ago when he built a small optical telescope, turned it on the sky, and discovered the four largest moons of Jupiter, turned it on our own moon, discovered the craters of our moon. In the subsequent 400 years, electromagnetic astronomy has expanded from optical frequencies to radio, microwave, millimeter, infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma ray frequencies. And observations at all these frequencies have totally transformed our understanding of the universe. At all frequencies, electromagnetic waves consist of electric and magnetic forces that oscillate as they travel. Gravitational waves, by contrast, are radically different from this. According to Einstein, who predicted them 100 years ago, they consist of a stretching and squeezing of space, and therefore a stretching and squeezing of everything that resides in space, which means everything in the universe. But this stretch and squeeze are tiny, unbelievably tiny. The strongest waves passing through the Earth push two objects that are a few kilometers apart back and forth relative to each other by an amount that is almost 1 trillion times smaller than the wavelength of the light which we use to search for the gravitational waves. 10 million times smaller than an individual atom, 100 times smaller than the nucleus of an atom. About 50 years ago, Rainer Weiss, my dear friend at MIT, invented a device for measuring this tiny stretch and squeeze, and he identified all the major noise sources that such a device would have to encounter, have to deal with, and devised ways to deal with them. His device is called a gravitational interferometer for short. It consists of mirrors that hang by wires from overhead supports and that are pushed back and forth by the waves, and laser beams that measure the mirror's motions by bouncing back and forth between the mirrors and the technique of interferometry. After studying Weiss's ideas in depth, and initially thinking this is crazy, there's no way it can work, no way you can make measurements at that very, very small scale, I did become convinced that his interferometer had a good possibility to succeed, and a good possibility to do for gravitational waves what Galileo did for electromagnetic waves, create gravitational astronomy. The payoff for this would be enormous, it seemed to me, a revolution in our understanding of the universe, perhaps as great as the revolution that electromagnetic waves have brought. So beginning in the mid-1970s, I started to devote most of the rest of my career to helping Weiss and his experimental colleagues succeed. This half-century quest was very risky. Many different things could go wrong when trying to measure motion so tiny. To guard against all these things required making the interferometers complex, unbelievably complex. So complex that there are 100,000 data channels come out of each interferometer. Just one channel carries the gravitational wave signal. All the others carry information about what's going on inside the interferometer and what could go wrong. What's going on in the environment, what could go wrong. Remarkably, despite the high risk of failure, the U.S. National Science Foundation, which funded our so-called LIGO project, has continued to back us firmly with a total of $1 billion since providing our first construction funds in 1992. And the U.S. Congress, which sees our project as a specific line item in the NSF budget, has also backed us unequivocally, regardless of who is in power, the Democrats or the Republicans, for these past 25 years. And why have they backed us? Because of the high cultural payoff, if we succeed, a likely revolution in our understanding of the universe. But our LIGO project has had major technological spin-offs. Those, however, are minor in the eyes of Congress and the NSF compared to the cultural payoff, and this is a remarkable tribute to Congress and NSF and the general public who provide the funds. To give you some sense of the technological spin-offs, I will describe briefly one of them, a spin-off with a weird name, quantum non-demolition technology. Now, everything in the universe fluctuates randomly and unpredictably due to quantum physics. The heavier the object, the weaker, the smaller its fluctuations. Now, electrons are very light, so they fluctuate randomly a lot. And these fluctuations prevent you from ever knowing where an electron is inside an atom. All you can know is a certain probability that it is here or there or someplace else. LIGO's mirrors weigh 40 kilograms, as much as a small person, and because they're so heavy, each mirror's center of mass wiggles around by only a tiny amount. But LIGO's laser light must measure the location of that center of mass to an accuracy 10 million times smaller than an individual atom. And that, in fact, is about the size of the quantum fluctuations of the motion of the center of mass of these 40-kilogram mirrors. As LIGO improves over the next few years, we must measure the influence of a gravitational wave at a level smaller and ultimately much smaller than the mirror's random fluctuations. How can we get a gravitational signal through these randomly fluctuating mirrors without the signal's information being demolished by these fluctuations? To achieve this, we've invented and developed in the LIGO project quantum non-demolition technology. This new technology is needed today in only one place, LIGO, but in coming years it will be needed elsewhere and indeed will likely become a major part of the technology of the 21st century. The challenge of creating gravitational astronomy drew some of the world's most brilliant scientists into LIGO, and as a byproduct of their work, they created this new quantum non-demolition technology and many other spin-offs. Without the challenge of LIGO, these inventions would likely not have been made, at least not so soon. But, and I reiterate, these inventions were not the reason NSF and Congress sank $1 billion into LIGO. Rather, the primary reason was cultural, to create gravitational astronomy, and through it to revolutionize our understanding of the universe. So this brings me to the final part of my talk, the wonderful opportunities that lie ahead of us for exploring the universe and the laws that govern it. Again, I'll focus on explorations with the tools I know best, the LIGO gravitational interferometers and electromagnetic telescopes that augment LIGO, complement LIGO. I begin with black holes. Black holes are amazing. A black hole's gravity is so strong that nothing can escape from inside it, not even light. Perhaps more interestingly, a black hole is not made from matter, like you and I and all other objects you've ever seen. Instead, it's made entirely from warped space and warped time. Time slows as you near a black hole's surface, its so-called horizon. At the horizon, time slows to a halt. If you hover at the horizon, then the time that you measure will cease to flow. Imagine that. And if you fall through the horizon, you'll discover that inside the horizon, time flows in a direction you would have thought was a space direction, toward the center of the black hole. Space near a black hole is warped. The circumference of a circle around the black hole is far smaller than the diameter of the circle, something that can only occur because of the warping of space. As a black hole spins, its spin drags space into a whirling motion, rather like the air in a tornado, and that whirling motion of space grips anything that falls near the black hole and sends it whirling around and around like straws in the air of a tornado. When two black holes collide, they create a storm in the shape of space, in the whirl of space, and in the flow of time, a storm analogous to the writhing of the ocean's surface in a gigantic weather storm. The first 6 gravitational waves observed by LIGO were from colliding black holes, and the shapes of the waveforms of the gravitational waves as a function of time that came off agreed beautifully with the computer simulations that computed the waves from a black hole storm, from the wild writhing of space and time inside the black hole. In effect, we've seen the storms, the black hole storms, through the gravitational waves, and the storms are as Einstein's laws predict. As Mr. Murthy remarked, last August 17, LIGO observed a burst of gravitational waves from a pair of colliding neutron stars. Each of these stars was about 1.5 times heavier than the Sun, but only 20 kilometers across. It had a density 10 times higher than the density of an atomic nucleus, and the star's collision produced a fireball from which emerged a burst of gamma rays detected by gamma ray telescopes in orbit above the Earth about 2 seconds after the collision. As the fireball expanded, it gradually became transparent to electromagnetic waves of lower frequencies, so astronomers successfully saw X-rays, ultraviolet light, visible light, infrared light, and radio waves. The details of the light were in accord with the prediction that such stellar collisions, as Mr. Murthy remarked, are the primary source of our universe's precious metals, gold, platinum, and so forth. In fact, the theoretical simulations predict that the amount of gold produced by this particular collision of two black holes was equivalent to 150 Earths of pure gold, each made of solid gold. That much gold in this black hole collision. This neutron star collision was the most intensely studied object in the history of astronomy. To make these studies possible, it was essential for the gravitational astronomers to tell the electromagnetic astronomers where to look on the sky. Fortunately, about 2 weeks before the collision was seen, LIGO's two interferometers, one near New Orleans and the other near Seattle, were joined by a third gravitational interferometer called Virgo near Pisa, Italy. By measuring the delay in the arrival of the gravitational signal at these three interferometers, the gravitational astronomers could triangulate on the sky to determine where the source was, to within a volume that contained only about 49 galaxies. And in this region of sky with 49 galaxies, electromagnetic astronomers searched galaxy by galaxy for any kind of sudden light, sudden emission, and did discover a sudden emission coming from one particular galaxy called NGC 4993. And that radiation was of just the form expected from colliding neutron stars. So these observations marked the birth of so-called multi-messenger astronomy, observations of gravitational waves, one kind of messenger, plus many different frequencies of electromagnetic waves, each another kind of messenger, all of these coming from the same object. Multi-messenger astronomy is likely to be the thing that really revolutionizes our understanding of the universe, not gravitational waves by themselves. But to enable this, we will need positions of the gravitational wave sources that are far more accurate than what we had for this neutron star collision. And for this, the premier new instrument to enable these very good positions is INDIGO, a LIGO gravitational interferometer that will begin operating in India around 2025. This interferometer is not only crucial for the future of multi-messenger astronomy and gravitational astronomy, it also brings to India LIGO's remarkable technologies, such as quantum non-demolition technology. Now, gravitational waves penetrate through all forms of matter, and because of this, they're the ideal tool for observing the earliest moments of the universe. Theory predicts that when the universe was younger than a trillionth of a second, it was so hot that the electromagnetic force didn't even exist. And Maxwell's equations, which govern electromagnetic force, were irrelevant. They had no sway over anything. Instead, there was a different force, a so-called electroweak force. According to theory, when the universe was about a trillionth of a second old, the expansion of the universe and the associated cooling triggered the electroweak force to break apart, creating the electromagnetic force and an associated weak nuclear force. And these new forces may have been born inside bubbles that, according to theory, should have expanded at the speed of light, collided, and produced gravitational waves that can be seen today, 13 billion years later, by a gravitational wave interferometer called LISA that measures gravitational waves with 10,000 times longer wavelength than LIGO. LISA will be launched by the European Space Agency into space around 2030. I look forward eagerly to the day when LISA sees these gravitational waves and thereby watches the birth of the electromagnetic force, the birth of Maxwell's equations, the birth of the laws of nature that govern electricity and magnetism. Theorists also speculate that the universe began with the so-called Planck era, in which space and time and matter were all created together, and that this Planck era was followed by an epoch of extremely rapid expansion called inflation. Theory insists that this inflation amplified, greatly amplified, whatever gravitational waves emerged from the Planck era, producing a rich spectrum of gravitational waves today. And that spectrum carries mixed together information about the Planck era itself and about inflation. By the middle of this century, these primordial gravitational waves may well have been measured by two different frequency bands, waves with periods of a few seconds to a minute, observed by a follow-on mission after LISA, and waves with periods of a few 100 million years observed indirectly by their influence on the electromagnetic cosmic microwave radiation from the Big Bang. I look forward eagerly to seeing the results of these measurements if I live that long, and I will try very hard, because they will be our first detailed glimpse of the Planck era, our first direct observations of the Planck era and the epoch of inflation, in effect, our first direct observations of the very birth of the universe. And because that birth is governed by the poorly understood laws of quantum gravity, the holy grail today of theoretical physics, these observations might tell us much about these mysterious new laws. They may be the ultimate test of the laws of quantum gravity. The future of astronomy and cosmology is truly exciting. Through Indigo, through other instruments and theoretical work, your nation and its scientists will play a major role in this exciting future, along with the scientists of the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Thorne. You're indeed an icon for great science, for helping us expand our understanding of the universe, for making science accessible to everyone, and of course, for being a strong advocate for continued scientific discovery. Thank you. As we draw this evening to a close, may I now request Mr. Nandan Nilekani to deliver a vote of thanks.
Well, it's always nice to bring up the tail end of an amazing evening like this by recognizing and appreciating all those who made it possible. First of all, I have to thank our chief guest for the evening, Professor Kip Thorne, who flew in from Hawaii just for this evening and goes back tomorrow night. So he's come all the way from Hawaii, and Hawaii is a completely different time zone, maybe a different planet, I don't know. And considering a very hectic schedule, we're indeed grateful that you could make it. We really appreciate your commitment to your work and science in general, and we're glad you're putting it into forms like film and art so that the rest of us can understand it better. Thanks to our wonderful jury chairs on the dais, most of whom have been with us since the inception of the prize. Of course, we miss Professor Amartya Sen, who couldn't make it this year for the first time in 9 years. Thank you all for your guidance and all the years. Every year, you pick a fantastic panel of academicians and researchers and pore over the nominations and deliberate with them till you find the right candidate for the Infosys Prize. It's months of work distilled into this evening. Thank you to those of the jury members who could make it. I'm sure the winners have been delighted to meet with you today. The recipients of the Infosys Prize 2017 are lucky to have the warm support of their families, friends, colleagues, and all of you seated here tonight, a joy that's shared. The government of India has been very far-sighted in making the prize money for the brilliant scientists and researchers who win the Infosys Prize tax-free in India. This is really an investment in the future of the country, and we thank the government for this gesture. I would be remiss not to thank my colleagues, the trustees of the Infosys Science Foundation, without whose vision and collegial partnership, the Infosys Science Foundation's mission would have been a dream. Mr. Murthy articulated his dream to us way back in 2009 to start the Infosys Science Foundation to make science and research fashionable in a culture perhaps largely enamored by the IT industry. We thank Murthy for his vision and foresight. And finally, I would like to thank the lean team of the Infosys Science Foundation, Bhavna Mehra, Gurpreet Walia, and Nidhi Verma, who do make a little go along with the help of our in-house strategy guru come MC, Deepak Padki, and a host of other helping hands. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nandan. I now request Mr. Narayan Murthy to present a token of our appreciation to our chief guest and to the jury chairs. Thank you, Professor Thorne. And to our jury chairs, Professor Inder Verma, Professor Inder Verma, Professor Pradeep Khosla, Professor Srinivas Kulkarni, Professor Srinivasa Vardhan, Professor Kaushik Basu, and thank you, Professor Akhil Bilgrami. Thank you, Mr. Murthy. I would now like to request our winners to come up on stage for a group photograph with Professor Thorne, Mr. Murthy, and Mr. Dinesh. Can we have the winners up on stage, please? Gentlemen, let's give our winners a big hand. Congratulations to all of them. Ladies and gentlemen, the winners of the Infosys Prize 2017. Thank you. Thank you. The winners can get back to their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for sharing this special evening with us. I hope to see all of you in a year's time for the next Infosys Prize presentation ceremony. Please do wait a moment while our guests exit the hall. Dinner will be served in the Royal Ballroom. Please have a very pleasant evening. Thank you and good night.